like an electric shock. It will now trigger your own love system. You start feeling that you have met a perfect person. That your partner maybe he probably came down from heaven, or
your knight in shining armor. Hello guys, welcome to another episode of Life Lessons KC. With me here is Ifoma. You can see she's a beautiful woman, very intelligent.
I'm a wife and a mother. I'm a God lover. I'm a purpose-driven and a kingdom-minded person, kingdom-minded believer who is interested in everything that advances the will of God. And like we know, we're here to talk about marriage. Marriage is one thing that seeks to bring the will of God, that encourages the will of God being done here on earth.
Today we want to talk about love languages. And my sister here will be reviewing the book, The 5 Love Languages, written by Gary Chapman. The book explains that everyone has a love language. Like, you have something that makes you feel loved. And for you to show love to someone, you need to understand the person's love language. But generally in Nigeria, one thing I've noticed is that it's like women have one love language and men have one. Maybe we'll talk about that later. Because I've noticed that most women complain about their husbands not having time for them. So it's like all women are looking for time and attention. While the men, they feel that the only way to show love is by providing, which I can call an act of service. Because you can see that when they're talking about issues of infidelity and all that, what the men will say is, as long as the man is taking care of his wife, as long as he's taking care of his children, it doesn't matter. Because to them, that is what love is. But the woman has to keep explaining why we need to do an activity together to bond. That is what spending time with someone means to the woman, not just that you're there. I will hand over to my sister to summarize what Gary Chapman talked about in his book. Then after that, I'm going to ask you a question that people have been arguing about concerning marriage. So stay tuned so that you don't miss out on that. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Casey, for having me on this platform. So we are here to review the book, The 5 Love Languages by Dr. Gary Chapman, who is a renowned marriage counselor. He's also a consultant in marriage and family life. So at least we are talking of an authority here. The author started with what happens to love after marriage. Why do couples seem to lose that spark, that thing that brought them in, like that brought them together in the first place? So he was of the opinion that keeping love in the marriage is actually serious business, and everyone has to put in effort to ensure that this thing called love does not just leave the marriage. And how do we do this? According to the book, according to Dr. Gary Chapman, he said we do this by learning to speak the other person's love language. Now, what does he mean by love language? According to the book, he said, while growing up, we all have our native language, kind of, which we are most comfortable in. And this native language is formed by our parents, their own primary language, our siblings, the environment. So that becomes the basis. That becomes the language you are most comfortable in. That's referring it to linguistics generally now. But he said, as we grow older, as we interact with people, as we move closer to other people, we find out that these other people also have their own primary love languages, which may be quite different from ours. And for us to communicate effectively with these other people, we need to learn their own language. And in learning that language, it becomes our own secondary love language. Relating it to love, he said everyone has their own primary love languages based on the experiences they had while growing up, based on the exposure, the upbringing, the kind of different things that happened to them while they were growing up. So everyone had their own primary love language, which is quite different from ours. So we have to learn their own language, which becomes our own second or primary love languages if we are to communicate effectively. And then he also talked about a love tank, something called a love tank. He said your love tank can be full, it can be empty. Your spouse speaks your love language. Your emotional needs are met, and by meeting these needs, is keeping your love tank full. Like this love tank, he defined it as, he said, within each and every one of us, that there's this intimate desire to be loved or to be intimate with another. And he said marriage provides that is designed to meet this need for intimacy and love. So say when your spouse speaks your love language effectively, your love tanks becomes full. But when they don't speak it or when they don't understand it, you begin to run on an empty love tank. And then he said, having an empty love tank can lead to things like frustrations, withdrawal, anger, doubt, harsh words, a critical spirit, and all that. But then, if your love tank is full, that is, if your spouse is meeting up with your emotional needs, it can lead to things like, it will create a climate where both of you can talk about your differences and resolve your conflicts. So he also talked about something called the in-love experience. I like this one so much because he says the in-love, that's something we call falling in love. We say we fall in love. When do we fall in love and when do we fall out of love? The writer is of the opinion that falling in love is just it's just a temporal emotional high. There is something that creates this
The fantasy.
like an electric shock. It now trigger your own love system. You start feeling that you have met a perfect person, that your partner maybe he probably came down from heaven, or
Your knight in shining
you start
armor.
having beliefs that may not be in the night. It's an obsessional kind of love. It's not irrational kind of love. But say at some point you will come down from that height. He said maximum it can last for 2 years. Some people fall out of love quicker than the other. Why fall out of love?
When they get married.
That in love experience phases out when they actually get married and begin to see the real thing. So he said for that kind of phase, that in love experience is now that is after you have expended that time. When that time is when you have come down from that love, you now face the real world. This is now where you start to learn to speak, like to learn and understand what the primary love language of your spouse really is. This is the stage where you now decide to love rationally, like you now choose to
You
love.
now
You are
make
no
the
longer
decision.
in a fantasy stage. You now choose to love.
Your
Okay,
eyes, the
you have
love that
seen
was
that
blinding your eyes will
differences. You now
now.
know that, okay, I choose to love this person, and this is how I choose to love. Choosing to love means you now decide to speak, you learn, you understand, you interpret, and choose to speak their love language. If they must understand the communication they are trying to pass on. And then I'll go on. He said, talked about five primary love languages. These love languages, like we have it in a normal language, they can be expressed in different dialects. Just like let me use the Igbo language for instance. It has different dialect, different ways you can express your language, the Igbo language. So he said these five love language they're divided into five. It's first he called in no particular order. He said words of affirmation. This is where you use words that build up. You decide to like use what they said life and death is in the power of the tongue. They said you now decide to, okay, let me speak to my spouse in such a way. You give him or her verbal compliments. People are moved more by what they hear. Because of the upbringing they have, you decide to, you can give verbal compliments. Maybe you look good. You give them compliments. You tell them something that makes their spirit. Not that you're not trying to manipulate them anyway, but you're just speaking the truth in love. The second love language, he talked about quality time. Quality time can also be expressed in different forms. You can have it in the form of togetherness, spending quality times together. And when we talk of quality time, it's like focus time. It's not the kind of time you spend like you're pressing your phone or you're watching TV and your spouse is screaming out, I need time, and then you're just you're you like you are near. And he said proximity is not, it does not mean that you're spending time. When you're spending time, you're focused on your spouse. Then you talked about having quality. Some people, they want that quality time spent in form of having quality conversations, like meaningful conversation where you look eye to eye, you understand what you even listen to the point of hearing what the other person did not say. Because there's a way you listen. There's something that the person may not say. You will hear because you're sensitive, you're listening. So he talked about doing things together, like you said, quality activities. And then he talked about the third love language. He talked about receiving gifts. Says gifts is to some. If you don't give gifts,
You've not
that
started.
is you have not even.
You don't
So
love them at all
love
until you give them something.
that gift is actually like a physical, a visual show of love to some. And if your spouse's love language is receiving gift, you have to be a proficient like you have to be a proficient giver. You give and you give and continue to give. In fact, all the love languages talks about giving. But there are some people that this particular receiving gift is
It's
like
their
is their
priority.
priority. You must show them
The moment you
love
stop giving
by
them a
giving
gift, they start
gifts.
feeling
Just like he
unloved.
talked about when you give your spouse the ring you exchange during your marriage. That if your spouse's love language is receiving gifts, they will cherish that. They will wear that ring morning 24, like they will not remove that because they cherish it. They see it as a token of your
Love.
expression of love to them. So you have to note those kind of people. If your spouse's primary love language, you have to give and keep giving. And then it's talked about you don't just give gifts. There are so many things you can give. You can give the gift of self, the gift of your time, your presence when your spouse needs it most. I'll go to the next one, which is acts of service. Talked about just act of service is doing things that you know your spouse would like you to do, not out of coercion, not out of, but because you have chosen to love this person, you have decided to speak his or her love languages. There are people that you can do every other thing, you can give them words of affirmation, but if you don't help them to, like, okay, just do the dishes where while they are not there, they don't see, they don't even, they don't regard, it's not as if they don't appreciate, but it's not their language. They don't understand the language you're speaking. And it becomes something else. He
Yeah.
said it's something you do because you decide to. And in doing it, you try to avoid stereotypes. You choose to do that love language because you have chosen to. Nobody's forcing you to do it. And you know that this is your spouse's love language. So avoid any form of stereotype.
If your husband's love language is act of service,
Okay.
he will appreciate if he helps him with the car.
Okay, yes, you can watch the car, you can.
But I don't know how many
You
women
can.
watch cars. It's because we are talking about a stereotype.
Stereotype, yes.
Yeah, because we always want to talk about the man, that the
The
man can
man.
do dishes,
Yeah, maybe
the man can
because
cook, the
okay.
man can bathe the kids. What about the woman?
The woman, yes, like
The
you
man
said,
can
the
on
woman
generator.
she can on generator. That's some women that don't like doing that, and your spouse may want something like that done for him. So we talked about the next one, which is physical touch. So there are some that their love languages is mostly they appreciate the language you're speaking most when it comes to physical touch, and they say this physical touch, it can be explicit or it can be implicit. That's explicit in the sense that it can be expressed, it can be more deliberate, it has to you it takes your time and attention. Like let's say you said the foreplay during before sex and all that, but then it can also be implicit when it's required, just a brief, maybe a brief touch, a brief kiss, a hug, or just something. Maybe when you're passing by, just show it, kind of touch anything. But the body is meant to be touched, but in touching you have to be sensitive because the touch that brings pleasure to you may not be the same thing that brings pleasure to your spouse. Then the author also talked about how you can discover your own love language as a person, how you to discover your primary love language. As I said, there are three ways that you can discover your love language. The first, I said, you ask yourself, what makes you feel loved the most? Like, what would you like your spouse to do that if he or she does, it gives you satisfaction? You like, what do you like above all else in your marriage and you wish your spouse would do for you? And then he said, what is that thing that you most often, there is something that you always want that you request of your spouse? It could be you're asking your spouse for time, you're asking your spouse to help you with the kids, you're asking, there is something
That's that is always causing
that you
problem.
that you're always asking your spouse for, and to you are just trying to communicate your emotional needs, but it may come off to your spouse as nagging. So you can still rephrase it and say, what is that thing that causes you to nag? So you might see it as another play, like a way to find out what your love language is. And then he said, what's it? There's something that you do for your spouse that you wish your spouse would do for you. Like this, you're trying to give out what you are expecting in return. Like you do unto others as you want them to do unto you. So what is that thing that you do for your spouse that you wish them to do for you? That's another clue to finding out your primary love language. And then he talked about love. He tried to summarize by saying love is a choice. That is, after coming down from that stage, that in love experience, you suddenly discover that you did not marry an angel. And then you have now decided to live in the real world where you face real challenges, you face real people. So he said, now you have decided that I'm not just obsessed about this love thing. I've chosen to love this person. Love becomes natural at this stage. So he said, love is a choice. We decide to love. And how do we decide to love? By deciding to choose, to learn, to understand, and deciding to speak the love language of our spouse. If we decide to speak the love languages of our spouse, whether or not those things come naturally to us. There are some people tell you, I don't like doing this, I don't like doing that. But you still have to do it anyway, because even though it
That is
doesn't come
your.
naturally to you, but you are
That's how
now
you show
living in the
love
real
to
world,
your
and
spouse.
you have to speak your spouse's real language. One thing why I like this book is that it gives us the opportunity to walk into different homes, different marriages, real life, to meet real life couples, to experience the real life challenges they have, the real life issues, and how they dealt with it. And you see that it's an everyday problem. It's a natural. It's something that happens in our homes every day. I would recommend that we all read this book, like for intending couples, and even for couples that are already in marriage, whether good or bad marriage. If you have a bad marriage, you can make it good. If you have a good marriage, you can even make it better,
Better.
because learning is a lifelong thing. You should either be learning something new, you are unlearning something you already learned in
Yes.
another way, or you relearn so that you make it better. So it's talked about, he also talked about these love languages and how they apply to children, how you can get clues of how it's not easy to guess what children's love languages really are. But he suggested you can just give them these five languages, but with time you get to see some characters in them that
Yes.
will make you to understand that, okay, yes,
This is what
this is
makes
their
this
primary
child feel
love language. And
loved.
then the way you treat one child should not always be the way you apply it to another, because their
Yes.
love languages may be different. When we effectively learn to speak the love language of our spouse, it creates this positive atmosphere where you can discuss differences, where you can resolve conflict, where everyone feels significant, where you can meet each other's need, and you bring out the best of each other. So the key thing is, what is your love language? What is yours, and what is your spouse's love language? And what are you doing to speak the correct language, their correct love languages to them?
Wow, that was amazing. Thank you so
So
much.
let me even ask you, what is your, okay, you said it, you said
No, I'm not sure. For me, I want all the love languages. I want time. I want gifts. I want acts of services. I want physical touch. I want words of. I think me, I nag about time, as I've said before. But
okay.
do you know why maybe that's actually my love language, because I don't even have any reason to be nagging about time, because my husband is not the kind of person that hangs out with the boys, all those
Okay.
kind of things. After work, he comes back home, and we're always together. We go to church together. We do things
So I
together.
still want.
But I'm still feeling that, like, even when we go out, I'll be like we're out, but
You're
you're not
not.
giving me
Yeah, that means.
time.
Yeah, that's the he's not expressing your love
And
language
to
should
him,
be
he's like,
quality
and to
time.
him, he feels like I cannot kill myself because
Maybe he's not expressing it in the dialect. That's why I said there are different ways you express. Maybe you want quality conversation as a means, as your love language is quality time, but it should be expressed in form of
there should
quality.
still be words inside. Because the time I was feeling my love language is actually words of affirmation, because I'm always itching to hear something. Like, there was a time I was telling you that I don't even know whether I'm a good wife to you. And it's like, like, you're a good wife
Eh,
now. What else?
what
Have I
what do you
said
want to
anything to
hear?
make you feel like you're not a
And
good
maybe
wife?
it could be a secondary love language. Like you said, you can have them in order of priorities, but this is the one that comes first. This is
First.
the one that you prefer above the other
Yeah.
ones.
So what's your love
My love
language?
language. For me, I would say acts of service and quality time. Quality time. But I think it still depends. I don't know, but I'll say it depends on the the mood I am in. There are times that what you just need is quality time, and your spouse is not giving you quality time. There's at some
Yeah.
other times you just find out that what you need is maybe acts of
Mm.
service, maybe because you've had a long
I think
day
maybe
and all
our
that.
spouses would have been in the right position to tell us that, okay, this is what you always nag about.
Okay, okay.
Because
Yeah, but I
I
know
think they will
what
always
I
know.
nag about.
For couples that want to make their relationship better, this book is highly recommended, because it's going to open your eyes to things that you may be neglecting. And again, you know that love is not all about what you want. So it's also going to help you to discover what your partner wants. When you see the things they do for you, the way they try to show you love, it will help you to also understand their own love language and know that, okay, Maybe this is what I should do for this person for him or her to feel loved. Now, the question I said I'll ask you. There has been this argument going on among people that marriage is not an achievement. There are people that are for and there are people that are against emotion. That marriage is not an achievement. So I want to know your view on this. Is marriage an achievement? Is marriage not an achievement?